That should be the name for the episode, Inanimate Carbon... I can't even say what you said.
Inanimate Carbon Rod.
Select characters where gaming meets analysis.
Hello and welcome to the 32nd episode of the Select Characters podcast. I'm Sam Yates. I will be your host, and joining me in the deepest, darkest regions of the Amazon rainforest, standing in front of what looks to be some sort of ancient temple. But we brought our microphones and we're here to record, and I've got xenobiologist Christopher Anderson. What's up, man?
I really hope that all the damp air is not going to fuck with all the equipment.
I think we'll be cool. We bought special stuff.
Cool.
And plus it might not be damp. Who knows?
Probably it's a rainforest.
Yeah, it's a rainforest.
Just trying to get you motivated. Let's slide on over and let's talk to the chief biologist in charge of plants and animal species, Ryan Dildine. What's up?
Hey, well, I'm sick, and I hope it's not some dangerous jungle virus, but hanging in there.
Jungle fever.
Jungle fever.
the literal version, not the metaphorical one.
No comment.
All right, I loaded down with all of the assorted arms and whips and machine guns and all the mercenary equipment. Enrique Cancel, how are you?
Getting the strangest feeling of deja vu. Not because I'm carrying all the weapons, but because I feel like we've been here before.
Have we? Have we already been here?
I thought we did a treasure hunting at some point.
It was the rainforest so nice we visited it twice.
Yeah, or maybe it ended in a mind wipe last time, or maybe we're doomed to just repeat this over and over again.
Oh, that was one of the curse side effects I read about.
But we're all here, and we're all ready to start podcasting, so let's talk a little bit about what we've been playing this week. And it has been another excellent week for video games. Let's talk a little bit about what we've been playing. Let's start with Ryan.
Well, I had to go back to the tried and true with finals coming up, so I did Rocket League, which just did their... what was the update called? It's the post-apocalyptic one.
Yeah, it has like the Fallout stuff with the bobbleheads and everything.
Revenge of the Battle Cars. That's what it's called. And it's cool. Like, I mean, they give you the new cars and they give you the new decals and stuff. But there's a new arena, and it's non-standard. I'm pretty sure it's a lot bigger than the normal arena, and it's like full of sand and stuff, and it looks kind of post-apocalyptic.
Neat.
And it's been pretty cool. I've been doing the mutator mashup on that pretty much every day. At least I've played a couple games, and then I did some Counter-Strike. I haven't played Counter-Strike in like a month, so it was bad news. It was I didn't.
I find that hard to believe.
I know it was. Yeah, it was bad. I've lost my I don't know what to call it. My abilities, my edge. So I need to get back into Counter-Strike. I think that's what I'll be doing here for the next few days at least.
It's probably because you're getting too old for Twitch shooters now.
Oh, I know. That's it. 23 and a half. That's the
cutoff date.
Oh yeah, man, you're way too. That's way too old.
Were you were you actively enjoying Rocket League again? Because I remember a few episodes ago you mentioned that you were reaching that cusp of, I guess, frustration / like competitive anger.
Yes. So I gave up playing ranked, and I just have been playing Mutator Mashup, and that has totally brought me back into it. Like I'm there for the fun with Rocket League.
Yeah.
You can't have fun in games with a ranked mode.
I know.
Did anybody ever make a Car Wars video game? Has that ever existed?
Car Wars?
Yeah, maybe not. I guess not.
It's
like a tabletop thing. And you build and customize these cars, and then you like maneuver around each other, try to blow each other up. Turn-based thing. That'd be an awesome video game.
Huh.
Actually, yeah.
There is a Car Wars for the TI-99.
All right.
Well, I know what we're playing next week.
I have one of those.
That's all I was able to find.
Yeah, just let me get my TI-99 out of the attic.
Is there even a 99? That seems high.
Wasn't like 89 the last one?
I don't know. Thanks for tuning in to our Texas Instruments podcast.
Get your protractors and compasses ready.
Bring it back to not calculator-based video games, and let's talk to Enrique. What you been playing this week?
I was actually playing Drug Wars on my TI-89. I tell you what, man, the price of acid. No, but no, I actually I forgot that Rising Tide had come out for Sid Meier's, so I actually bought that and been playing that for a little bit now.
Oh, right. Beyond Earth.
Yes.
Right?
Oh,
So what's it like?
Man, like Sid Meier's has this really strange habit of releasing, at least for the Civ series, where they release this really cool and concept game that just feels half-assed. And then a few months down the line, they release an expansion that kind of fills it up, and then everybody's like, yeah, this is great. And it's kind of the same feeling I got with it now. Because when I first picked up Beyond Earth, I mean, it was cool, it was interesting, but it just felt like it was lacking. And then with Rising Tide, they added a bunch of stuff, and the biggest thing that I love is they overhauled the diplomacy system.
Sorely needed in Civ games.
Dude, and it makes a world of difference, because, one of the things that, I guess one of my biggest pet peeves with Civ is, the diplomacy system, it almost feels like the leaders will just turn on you on a dime, and it doesn't make sense why. You could have a great alliance going with somebody, trade agreements, and then out of nowhere, they'll just randomly be like, the world will hear your incompetence, and then they denounce you, and then 2 turns later declare war, and you're like, what the fuck just happened? We were sharing energy, everything was good. But with this, they actually have a really cool system in place where you can pick traits for your leader, and the traits are from, I think it's military, domestic, or industrial. And within those, there's sub traits that give you small bonuses, military, you can get extra experience from aliens, or extra experience from attacking other colonies, they've kind of fleshed out, and then each leader has preferred stats and preferred traits. So, if you focus on building up your agricultural systems, one leader might be really positive towards that, so it makes them more inclined to be in alliance with you versus somebody that absolutely hates if you have a high population. It's actually really cool, and it's really fleshed out. Yeah, so that alone, it's its own meta game. And then they also included the concept of hybrid affinities, which is really cool. Because before, you could go 1 or 3, basically, I guess, kind of tech paths that would upgrade your units, but now you can kind of blend the two, and it gives you some different bonuses based on that too.
All right.
Sounds neat.
The problem I had with Beyond Earth was that it doesn't have that historical sort of slant to it. So all the characters or all the civilizations that you play are basically just sort of blank slates. You have no history to associate with them. They're not Genghis Khan. They're not George Washington. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's also a problem with the setting itself.
Yeah, that's definitely true. You can't really have historical characters in a space setting. I know, but that's one of the things that I really like about the Civ games in general, is that you get to play as well-known historical figures.
Yeah, I can see that. If that's the case, they're not even going to try to tease that, because obviously, this is a completely different setting. So the whole historical aspect of it is just thrown out the window. But it's kind of cool though. They did flesh out. I think they streamlined a lot of the base game itself. Even something as simple as the little in-game quests, they're organized a little bit nicer. The interface itself is cleaned up a lot more. It feels like what Civ should have been when it released at first. It feels like the complete game now.
Cool.
Yeah, they always do that.
Yeah, so you could probably wait for a Steam sale, and you'll get both of the games together for a discounted price. But for anybody that has the original Beyond Earth and thought it was a little lackluster, it's definitely worth picking up Rising Tide to kind of complete it off.
Cool.
I'll take a look at it in the coming week then, because I've got it.
Anything else?
No, just mainly that, and I kind of went back and played some Binding of Isaac, because I don't know what it is about that game, but every now and then I just get an urge to play for maybe an hour, and then that's it.
Yeah, it's really good for that kind of short burst stuff. Did you play the new expansion?
No, I haven't actually. I have a weird thing about those games where when a new expansion comes out, I have to kind of play the base game first, just because I need to kind of refresh my mind for how everything works out. So
I'm that way too.
Yeah. With that game in particular, I'm if I went back to the base game, I'd have no idea what anything does anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So just adding more stuff that I don't know what it does doesn't really make a huge difference, because I wouldn't know anyway. But the expansion's good, man. That greed mode is pretty fun.
Let's try that out next.
Yeah, it's worth checking out. Let's see, and we have Chris left. Chris,
Hi.
what you been playing?
I've been playing WildStar, actually. I haven't played it since the 3rd month after release, and now that it has gone free to play, I can sort of jump back in again without having to pay anything.
Oh, nice.
So
You get your same character back?
yeah, I still have my same character, but because of a lot of stat changes in the way that gear works, I didn't have any gear left. All I had left was a bunch of tokens I could use to buy new end game gear.
All right.
So yeah, that was pretty cool. I don't like that game's progression, like the PvE progression. I flat out don't like it. It's ginormous grind.
Yeah.
So
It's grinding upon grinding upon more grinding, and that becomes really, really tiring after a while. But on the other side of that, you've got the fantastic combat system that has basically ruined MMOs, like hotkey MMOs for me forever.
Really?
It's so involved. You have to think about where you're standing. You have to look at what the enemy is doing. You have to dodge at the correct time. It just feels so much more involved than just standing there and waiting for your cooldowns to pop so you can throw another spell at an enemy. It just feels better to play. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the PvP section of the game, like the battlegrounds and stuff. Mm-hmm. They are still incredible. I've been away from the game for long enough to forget everything that I learned about PvP. So to me, all it was just disco chaos, basically.
Yeah.
I had no fucking idea what was going on most of the time, but I was really enjoying it. And I won't be playing that game often, but I will definitely jump back into it every now and then to play some of the PvP, because that combat system is absolutely amazing. I love it. And it's a shame that that game hasn't taken off as much as I think that it should have, because it could have been not just a good game, it could have been an amazing game if they didn't make all those weird design choices, like catering to a hardcore crowd that does not exist anymore, and the heavy focus on PvE grinding.
Yeah. How much of the grinding is because of the free-to-play stuff, or was it always that way?
It was definitely like that.
It was always that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. It's always been a slog, basically. It mirrors vanilla World of Warcraft. And in 2015, that is not really something that you should aspire to, because vanilla Warcraft, doesn't matter what anybody tells you, vanilla Warcraft was fucking shit. It was. And as a result of that, the progression in WildStar is also quite terrible.
I think the problem with that, though, is that at the time there was nothing else like it out, so they were experimenting a lot, so people didn't really know any better, so they're like, oh yeah, like this is great, it builds dedication and all that stuff. But when you look at that game now, I mean, it's grindy as hell, and nobody has time for that. It's not fun.
Or if you were me and coming to vanilla WoW from EverQuest, you were like, wow, this is speedy.
Oh god.
Yeah, I had the same. I've been playing WoW since vanilla as well, and when vanilla came out, I was like, Jesus Christ, this is like the best thing ever. Like the pacing's absolutely perfect, this and that. But then you grow up and you see how other games do it, and you just sort of start to realize that maybe this grinding treadmill that I'm on is not really me having fun. It's just me working towards the bits that I think are fun, and once I'm there, I sort of realize that that's just another grind to something else that may be fun, but ultimately really isn't.
And I think I think that enough people have jumped into that and then seen that and then jumped back out, like to the point that now today it would be really hard to get something like that off the ground, because people have been through that meat grinder, like they understand that it's sort of funky when you finally get to the end of it. And I guess that's why you can't sell like an MMO from 2000 anymore, like it just won't go over well.
Yeah, like if vanilla WoW was as good as people always claim it to be, then World of Warcraft would still be doing the exact same stuff it was doing when it first came out. But it's not. It has been tweaked. It has been streamlined. The whole process is a lot faster and a lot less painful to go through, really. It doesn't really hold your time hostage as much as it used to. So even like the king in the genre has realized that the way that it was doing things was not really working anymore. So I don't understand why the people behind WildStar thought, you know what? That thing that nobody wants to play, let's fucking make that.
I bet they wanted to like say, hey, we're going back to a time when MMOs were like this and it was great, but
And like people en masse say, yeah, that's what we want. We want all of that. And then they started playing it, and then they realized that, oh wait, this is not what we want at all. So the game quickly died.
I mean, I think there's a little bit of merit to the argument, because under all the heaping elitism and crap you get from those people saying like, oh, everything's for casuals now, there's this underlying, I guess, sentiment that the way you play MMOs now, like there's almost no investment from people anymore because everything is so streamlined. It's not like in vanilla WoW, even though everything was like a chore and a grind, because you dedicate so much time, you felt like you earned the rewards you got. So, but I think people kind of misconstrue that argument, and you think that it was the grinding that got you there, and like that's what was so great about it. When in reality, it was just like that feeling of investment and that accomplishment. And there's other ways to achieve that, but with WildStar, I think they wanted to capture that feeling, but they didn't really think it through, and they just kind of settled for obviously having a 30-stage attunement quest is what people want to have.
No.
Well, I mean that subset is still there, though. I mean, it still exists. Like, it's a game that to be the best at it, you just have to spend more time in it. That's a resource that almost everybody has.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to be excluded because you don't have good reflexes, or you can't figure out a certain puzzle, or you don't understand something. Like, the barrier is just time.
But that's where WildStar is different. Because WildStar, due to its combat system, does require a decent amount of skill from the actual player to go through the content, especially the group endgame content. It is ridiculously hard. It just is. Even some of the dungeons are ridiculously hard, like raid hard.
That's a good point. And I wonder if that's why WildStar sort of suffered the way it did, because you're asking for an intersection of people. Like, right. You're asking for the people who say, all right, you know what, I might not have the most skills in the world, but I got time, and spending this time will make me the best. And then you're also asking, like, for the Venn diagram that overlaps with the people who say, all right, I have skill. Like, who are the people with skill and time? Maybe that's not enough people to support something like WildStar.
That's definitely the problem there. Yeah, they were catering to a vocal minority, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And look where that got them. It's a shame, because the game looks fantastic. The music is really good. Like, the art style is absolutely amazing. It looks like a Pixar movie, and I find the lore to be very interesting. Compelling. The world's compelling. The combat system's amazing. It's just some of the core mechanics are so tiresome that I just can't justify spending all my time with it. But, I've got a character at max level now anyway, so I can jump in whenever I like and just play a couple of PvP matches and not be worried about anything else. So, wid for me, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Cool. Anything else?
More MMO stuff.
Yeah.
I'm still chugging along in the Old Republic. I'm level 60 now. I'm finishing up the last quest line before the big new expansion, Knights of the Fallen Empire, I believe, which is supposed to be, like, people are saying it is essentially Knights of the Old Republic 3. So I'm really looking forward to checking that out, but I didn't want to make a character that started at level 60 because you have no attachment to that character, and because that game is so story driven, it was best for me to just start at level 1 and just use that character to see all the content there was to see on the Sith side, basically.
Yeah, get the full experience.
Yeah. 65 is the top now, with the inclusion of the latest expansion pack. And I'm nearly there. I'm so close. I'm so close to starting that expansion pack, but that combat system, it is a hotkey MMO like World of Warcraft is.
Yeah, that's quite a jump, isn't it? From like something really dynamic like WildStar to something like that.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm willing to sort of bear with it because I find the story to be utterly compelling. It gives me that BioWare fix, that the whole you have choice but not really thing. It just sort of fills that void, I guess. Like, you get the feeling that you're actually doing something to the story while you're not really doing anything. And I'm really having a good time, and I'll probably be having a good time for the foreseeable future. So yeah, the Old Republic. That was it.
Neat. All right. Let's see. As for me and myself this week, I played... Crap, I'm going to try it. I played a game called Recettear. Recettear? Recettear? Okay, I can't say it, but it's a good game. It's kind of like an RPG thing where you run an item shop, and time is divided into chunks of the day, and you spend your time doing actions in the town or like setting out and trying to sell items. And you kind of haggle with people. That's like a little mini game where you can tell them like you want them to pay 130% of the base price or whatever. And the goal is to keep making money so that you can pay off some debt that your dad accrued or whatever. And so that's about what you do. In addition, there's dungeons that you can run, and all the loot that you get from the dungeons you can sell without having to buy, so those are like 100% profit. Mm-hmm. Right. And the dungeons, it's action kind of RPG. It's definitely a controller game. And you just run around and fight stuff. I mean, it's simplistic but interesting at the same time. I like the idea of running an item shop.
That reminds me of one of the episodes a while ago. You actually mentioned that your dream game would be running an item shop where you would actually sell to the heroes, and then you'd have to, I guess, like you could decide to go to the dungeon to clear out some enemies so they could get.
Oh yeah. But you have to sneak down because like all the enemies you kill on the way to setting up shop halfway through the dungeon is like gold that they won't get because you already killed them. Yeah, well, I mean that would be cool, and this is definitely
the weirdest taste in games.
Yeah. This is moving towards that, but it's still a little simplistic on the surface. Mm-hmm. But just as a game to just sit down and play for a little while, it's bright and charming and fun, and it's good.
Hold up. Like you said a couple of episodes ago that was basically your dream, or that was something that you really, really wanted to play. You found a game that caters to that very specific niche.
Yeah, but it's
How is that even possible?
That's oddly specific.
Yeah, it's just not. I don't know. It's not right. Something's not right there. It's not enough of a management simulation.
Yeah, it's not a good enough RPG shopkeep simulator thing.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's not a good enough RPG shopkeeper simulator.
And it was what was it called?
It's called Recettear or Racketeer
with two C's, right?
Or one C. There's a number of C's in the title. Yeah.
Which C is silent?
The third one.
It changes. That's the trick. It changes.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't. I mean, it's. Yes, the ingredients are there, but overall it's still a little simplistic, and you can't exactly screw it up. Like,
right.
Basically, if you mess up, you start again from day one, but you keep all of your merchant levels, and you keep all the items you had when you couldn't pay your debt. So, I don't know. I mean, yeah, yes, but like maybe with some more systems in place.
So it's even a bit roguelike.
No,
in that way that you keep certain things, but you do die.
Well, I wouldn't call it, because roguelike normally you start fresh, like you wouldn't carry anything over. Like the ability to carry things over is sort of not very roguelike-y at all, and it's just not mentally stimulating to the point that I would want it to be. Like this is just kind of a relaxing game, like just mess around and kind of have fun.
So essentially, you could say that it's a roguelike.
No. Well, I guess, but I don't like the whole naming definition in that genre is absolutely off the rails. So I don't even want to touch that issue because it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I was just being facetious, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. Like that genre really needs to rebrand itself because they're not doing themselves any favors. 100%. I mean, like, it's good that people realize that these mechanics are really interesting like a year ago, and now they're everywhere. That's great. Like, good. But,
yeah,
so that was, I played that, and I played a little bit of Elite Dangerous, and I think that was largely it. Not too much of a busy week for me.
Speaking of Elite Dangerous, the Game Club video should be on the channel this week. I think by the time this comes out, it might be out, or it will be coming out like 2 days after that, something like that.
That is accurate.
But the video is going to be on the YouTube channel in the coming week. So keep an eye out for that.
And so that about wraps me up. You guys want to move on and let's talk about some topics?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sounds good.
So, talking about Elite Dangerous, which we played for Game Club this week, I want to talk to you guys about Space Sims because I've played a couple. I've played Elite Dangerous, and I've also played a fair amount of Space Engineers. That's actually probably my favorite Space Sim. It just kind of hits me kind of weird in the brain because we're trying to simulate something that we haven't really explored. So we're trying to, simulate space, and we haven't really explored that much of space. So other than Sam revealing to me that every game is a space simulator and blowing my mind,
It's true.
what are your guys' thoughts on an outer space simulator?
Like Universe Sandbox?
I guess. I mean, the genre I kind of feel like is pretty ill-defined because how do you put the entire universe in a game, you know?
You just put a lot of strands of not doing anything, apparently.
It's accurate.
That was really funny.
I'm not entirely sure if Space Simulator can be considered a game. Well, it doesn't really have objectives. It is sort of a sandbox, but it's not a sandbox in the way that video games are sandboxes sometimes. It's basically just a thing to test physics in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because, from playing Space Engineers... Have you guys played Space Engineers?
Have not.
Unfortunately not.
No.
Okay. Have you seen any trailers or anything, or are you guys pretty unfamiliar with it?
I've seen a little bit as far as like your spaceship. I think I saw it earlier when your spaceship would crash into an asteroid and you had to mine the asteroid to like build the spaceship back.
So, yeah, to put it into, I guess, really simple terms, it's Minecraft in space. But, I mean, I feel like that's really selling itself short. That's really selling it short, but just to get the point across, Minecraft in space. And, I don't know. To me, it ended up feeling like another building game, which is why I didn't stick with it for as long as some other people did that I know. But also that game's in alpha still, so they've updated it a lot since I last played it.
I think space is unique because space as an environment is a very compelling place to set games in, but space as a realistic simulation, often is kind of a downer because basically
there's a lot of nothing.
Yeah, endless tracks of empty space. So if you take that environment and make a sci-fi game in it, like FTL or Rebel Galaxy, like you're into something cool because you're just sort of using it as a backdrop. I think it's one of the coolest backdrops that's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems that the coolest parts of Space Sims, or the two that I've played, have been the things that wouldn't exist in space. So like, I really like the sound design in Space Engineers. I think it's really soothing, and you kind of have this quiet, like weird space hum in the background, and everything you do has this really satisfying noise to it. But in reality, you would have none of that. Another part of that game that's really fun is, building ships and going and fighting people, and the flying is pretty easy. But again, in reality, that doesn't exist. So I don't know. I hesitate to even call it a simulator, because what are you simulating other than your idea of space?
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. The case with simulators, in my opinion, is they try to simulate the good bits while just removing the bits that are just not as fun to do in real life. So it's just simulating the things that could be compelling while just leaving behind the things that aren't.
Well, like, I know with like Elite Dangerous, I mean, a lot of at least for me, a lot of the really interesting aspects of the simulation were, I guess, the ship itself and like the systems in the ship and everything. And just looking at the environments themselves, like landing into an actual space station or seeing the big planets in the background. But at the same time, like when you get into, I guess, the realistic aspect of it, like Chris mentioned, the game club, the whole ferrying cargo back and forth, it's very dull because a good 80% of the time, it's just you popping into, subspace and just cruising along. And there's really nothing to do aside from that.
The problem with space is that it's just very, very big. So you have to invent a whole slew of other mechanics to sort of fill that void.
Well, which is one of the hesitations I have with, was it No Man's Sky? Because I've seen a lot of talk on it, and it looks like a really cool concept and idea for the game. But the more I hear about it as well, I kind of start worrying the closer we get to the horizon, we're going to realize that it's a lot of content with a lot of filler in between. Because, I mean, like one thing he boasted about when they were talking about the developers, they said that there's like thousands and upon thousands of planets to go into, but even though you can land on them, only a small percentage of them is gonna have like any kind of life or structure to them. So it kind of makes you wonder, like, if we're making this into a space simulator, does that mean that they're gonna simulate all the bad parts of it too, where like life is 1 in a million chance?
I think there's a place for a game like that as well, because not everything in our universe is interesting. So why should their universe be completely interesting?
At least for No Man's Sky, I'd say from the gameplay stuff I've seen, it looks like they really attacked that traveling problem. Because, at least from what I remember, that he was like, point to this star, and then it would just like zoop and you're there. And then point to this planet, and then zoop and you're there. Like, that is what I've found to be the biggest fault of most games that take place in space is the travel time.
Yeah, so minimizing the downtime would go a very long way to keep you engaged for a lot longer, because there's just more to do if you're just traveling to stuff. Like, for instance, in Elite Dangerous, you're just sitting there, and it looks great and everything. It's great to look at nebulae and planets just zooming by, but in the end, you're just basically watching at a very expensive screensaver. So removing the downtime would go a very long way to keep that entertaining.
And like, I guess that's why No Man's Sky focuses on the planet exploration stuff. If you're somebody who really likes the exploration aspect of video games, you're going to get what you want from there. But if you are somebody who likes that stuff, traveling through a star field doesn't really give you necessarily a sense of exploration, because it's just the same thing for a period of time. There's nothing, you're not exploring anything. So I think that...
No, so there's a lot of merit to what you said earlier, that, the space is amazing as a backdrop, because it gives us all that, like that unknown frontier where we really know nothing about what's up there, so we can kind of throw whatever we want. But again, it's as a backdrop, so we can have games like Space Engineers where we're landing on meteors and building up ships ourselves that we want to pilot or destroy, or Elite Dangerous where you can hop on a cool cruiser and, have dogfights in space, but at the same time, we don't really care about the, like, for lack of a better word, the actual space part of it.
Yeah, the science is not as interesting. But yeah, you're actually right. I believe we're extending this from simulators, like from space simulators, to just space as a theme or as a backdrop, right?
Yeah.
A good example would be Borderlands 2. Pretty great game. I love it. Pumped over 150 hours into it by now, I think. Borderlands, the pre-sequel, is Borderlands in space. And that instantly becomes more interesting just because of the inclusion of space as a mechanic and the things that brings with it. So weightlessness and stuff like that. So I always enjoy it when they manage to incorporate like the very shallow things about space into video games. So, for instance, the weightlessness or the reduction in weight if you're on a planet.
Right. I know I was playing Rebel Galaxy, and that's actually, I guess, another... I hesitate to call it a space simulator because it does not have a lot of those like systems in place, but they kind of took the travel away from it and condensed it all, and it focused mainly on the combat aspect of it. So combat, it's pretty much ripped straight out of Assassin's Creed Black Flag. It's all broadside combat. Right. You're piloting your ship. You have an auto turret that slowly chips away at their health, and what you really want to do is kind of pull up on broadside and pelt them with like your cannons or plasma guns or whatever you have. And like those space battles probably form like the bulk of the gameplay experience that you enjoy, but the travel aspect of it doesn't take more than probably 2 to 3 minutes to get to like a really far destination. And even at that point, if you're traveling far enough, you can just go to hyperspace, and then between then and there's a ton of little events that you can stop off at, and basically you get some kind of interaction to break up the monotony of the travel.
And I think that when in that you actually see the crux of why space simulators don't work for some people. If you simulate something that is giant and empty, well, that doesn't work that well as a video game.
You'll have a giant empty video game.
Yeah.
You'll have.
I mean, like, the ship aspect of it is really cool, because, I mean, playing Dreadnought, it's technically another space sim in the sense that, you're in control of a ship, you get to customize your loadout, and you get into the fights, but, again, that game specifically focuses more on the actual combat aspect of it, so you're spending more time managing your ship and fighting against others, and, like, you have everything from giant frigates to smaller attack ships, like, speed versus size, and that's what the simulation part of it is, and, like, the travel and like the actual vastness of space thing is almost non-existent in it.
I've got another example for you. A game that uses space as a theme, and I think what it communicates to you as a player, I think, is quite interesting, and that is FTL. Sam mentioned it earlier. I think that game is really, really great at sort of encapsulating what like the pop culture sort of feel about spaces, like vast and empty and dangerous and unknown and maybe even a little bit scary. And I find that to be a very compelling backdrop for any game. And
yeah, no, FTL's awesome.
Yeah, but I mean, again, with FTL, though, it's one of those games where like they get rid of the tediousness of the actual travel. It's literally, click on the next location and you may or may not have an event, and then you go from there, because it's condensing the experience to just the highlights of what people want.
And using the unique
exactly.
mechanics that stem from being in space. Like, do I remove the oxygen from this room by opening it to a vacuum?
Yeah, or like, when you land too close to like a star or even like in a meteor field and you're constantly getting hit by debris that knocks your shields out.
Yeah, grab the good stuff. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, if you want to make a simulator, you're sort of not allowed to just grab the good stuff.
Yeah, I think that's, I think that's why I think Space Engineers was, it's a decently popular game, and I think it's because they don't let you do that, they don't let you grab the good stuff and go. You have to go mine for every resource to, build ships, build thrusters, all of that stuff. Build your entire base. You have to go and like painstakingly mine everything from different, not comets, but like asteroids, floating around.
Yeah, just to clarify, when I say good stuff, I mean like aspects of a universe and world. Not like actual materials, but like interesting gameplay decisions and mechanics that come from a certain setting.
Well, yeah. So I think that's why Space Engineers is so cool, because the way they place out the in-game good stuff, it makes you make those decisions. Like if there's a comet or an asteroid that's really far away, but that it's going to have a lot of, whatever ore you need, you have to like make that decision. Do I want to cross this distance? Which it's not too far that, it gets into that realm of you're just going through space for the sake of space travel. Yeah. But it is far enough that you may think, I don't have enough oxygen, or I might not have enough fuel to get over there.
Now that sounds awesome.
Yeah, I think when I was playing it, it was in a earlier state, and they've added planets and stuff I think they have a new renderer now too. But, anyways, yeah, they make you take those really careful considerations with everything you do. Like I remember playing, and we would go out and try to attack an enemy ship, and it's like, we would get out there, attack it, which was hard in itself, and then you take control of the ship, and then you're like, oh, I have no fuel to get back. And you just die because you run out of oxygen and you can't get back on your own little thruster pack. So yeah, I think Space Engineers, they were doing a good job of like kind of bridging that gap between like you want to have space travel, but I don't think anybody really wants to have true space travel.
Yeah, exactly.
And going along with that, though, like, there's something to be said about the actual vastness of space, because I remember, like, loading up Elite Dangerous, and seeing just how huge the universe is and how small you are in comparison to it. It does create kind of like a sense of awe as a player.
Yeah, and it is to scale as well.
Yeah, and it is to scale. Like, but that sense of wonderment does kind of wear off very quickly when you realize, crap, this means this is a good 20 minutes of flight time. So I'm gonna, put on a podcast and just like. Let the
I don't think that's.
Itself.
that's not exclusive to space sims either. Because any game where you figure out you have to travel, like Assassin's Creed. The first ones where you've got to walk everywhere or ride your horse everywhere. It's like, that sucks in every game. And space kind of presents this really big problem of these huge distances that you can't realistically cross. So you've got to make up some BS like, I found a wormhole or warp drive or something like that, And I don't know if it'll ever cross that problem.
Well, it's because it's a video game. You have to be willing to give some allowances to the fact that it's a video game. But if you're trying to model it realistically, you can't. You're sort of not allowed to, and that's a bummer, because that is not something that is interesting to model realistically, I don't think, personally.
Yeah, I agree.
No, I agree. But think about what Elite Dangerous would be without the Super Cruise thing. Because sometimes when you're warping out of Super Cruise and you can see your objective before you, and it's only 8 light seconds away. Well, convert that to like time, and that is 6 days. You know what I mean? Right. If you didn't have the warp thing, you just imagine that. You see that, you put your computer, you put the thrust on the thing, and then you just go do something else for a couple of days and come back. You're finally there. That's a bit too real for me.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to play that game. I don't need a video game to tell me that space is huge. Like, I know space is huge.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those times when it's okay to fudge the realistic simulation aspect of it. Like you said, we don't need to be reminded that space is really, really big or really, really boring at that.
Yeah. As long as it acts like space, that's usually good enough for most people.
Yeah, as long as it fits like your idea of space. Because I don't know what space is like. I have no clue. I know you float.
Yeah.
And I know from an episode of The Simpsons from forever ago, if you step out, that your head explodes, but that doesn't actually happen. That's my knowledge of space.
As some of you may know, I'm pretty into my stories, but here's a question for you. Do games need a main story?
No.
All right, we're done here. Thanks for listening. I think they do, because they sort of give you a reason to go to the game at all. And it sort of ties the entire world together, I think.
I mean, you're not wrong. I think that actually I think that the thing that's worth looking at is like, should it be mandatory? I mean, like, do they need them is sort of a different question, but like, is it necessary to shoehorn a main story into every single video game? Because it seems like that's the trend.
Yeah. I think, well, here's the thing. I don't think every game needs a story, but I think every game needs a space for your narrative to fit.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like,
flesh that out. That's interesting.
so like in what's a game? Okay, let's just use Counter-Strike because I play that a lot. So in Counter-Strike, there's no story to it, but I have my own personal narrative that fits with how I've been playing. It fits with the group of guys I play with, like how they view me as a player. And then also, it's like if I've been on a big losing streak or something, I know I have like this personal narrative of like, oh man, I can bounce back on the next game and, break that losing streak. Or in, it happens in pro sports too. Pro sports, they're playing games that don't have stories, but there's still a narrative that's pushing the game. Like, that's what I'm getting at. I think every game needs some sort of space for that, any kind of narrative, because without it, you don't really care that much.
Yeah, but I think you definitely find a different focus when you have games that are multiplayer competitive versus games that are single player experiences. Because a game that's multiplayer competitive, like, I don't know, Heroes of the Storm or, Counter-Strike, Dota, it
has a story, actually.
Well, yeah, but they don't need a story because the enjoyment of the game itself is just from, playing against other players. That's what kind of keeps you, like, the interactive thing going.
Yeah.
But when you have a single player game, if they were to throw you in a blank slate, like DayZ, I guess you could technically argue it's a single player game in the sense of that other players don't really, you're not necessarily forced to go head to head with them.
I think DayZ's supposed to get a single player mode, but I think Minecraft better represents that.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, all right. But they're games that, they don't really tell you what to do. They just drop you in a sandbox and say, all right, have at it.
See, but in those games, like in Minecraft, you still have a narrative. Like, you still have a little underlying narrative of like your own personal goals and your own little town you want to create or your own apparatus you want to create. And that's it's still a narrative that's driving you.
Yeah, but it's a narrative that is fully made outside of the game.
Yes, so that's why I'm saying I think all games need space for the narrative, but I don't think all games need a pre-constructed story.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that one, obviously.
Well, it's funny because like when we mentioned this whole argument about do the games need a main story, I just immediately think of Bethesda games where like Fallout, Skyrim, Morrowind, where you have the main quest story branch that kind of leads, from point A to point B, and that's what your character story is. And then you have all these little side stories and side quests, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, but I find that 9 times out of 10, I don't finish the story as a priority whatsoever. It's always going off and doing your own thing and exploring, and that story is the only time I actively engage in it is when I have to for the sake of progression. Like, in Skyrim, you can't really unlock the dragon shouts until you get to a certain point in the story, or like, hey, I can't unlock this feature until I do this part.
Yeah, I can see that. I think for me, it's like, I enjoy that stuff too, but I'd like the main story where you're kind of, I don't know, not forced, but it's a very guided narrative. As long as the character isn't so disassociated from me, that I feel like it's a separate person, Right.
Well, and I guess it just brings me to the question, because when you have a game like Skyrim, could a game like Skyrim survive if they just didn't have the whole Dragonborn plotline? If it was just, you start off in the prison, you break free, and then they leave you to your own devices?
To be honest, that game can hardly survive even with the narrative.
I think you might have a better game there. I think that a main story is way better implemented in a more linear experience.
Right.
I think that those games absolutely should have a main story because playing through them is working your way through that story.
Yeah.
But all your open world RPGs, I think would almost be better if they just dropped the main story and just like have a world, have your side quests, because the side quests are oftentimes more interesting than the main story anyway.
I don't agree. For a lot of people, that main story helps them to get hooked into the game, and it gives the world context. It gives what you do meaning. It gives your character a certain meaning within that world. So I think it's very important to have a main story there.
Not necessarily, because I mean, even like Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, I'm thinking back on it. I mean, the main story was crap to me. I had more enjoyment out of going and visiting the little settlements and going through like these miniature quest lines. You run into people, and it got me thinking. I'm like, you know what? If this game was just presented to me with a series of small side quests and I guess miniature stories that I go about discovering, I could enjoy it just as much as if I had a main story that I'm ignoring.
I would argue that it might even be more immersive. You might even be more immersive to say, I'm a blank slate, let's experience this giant open world. Because by tacking on to the main story, it's making you a character instead of making you like a blank slate representation of yourself in this world space.
Right.
Yeah, but you have games like that, and those games are made like that by design. And those most of the time feel fine without a main story because they center around what you do as a player. But I think you're an outlier in this case. Most people do like a main story,
and I do too. In a directed linear experience, there's nothing else that is the engine to progression.
Yeah.
Besides a main story, but I think that. Basically, it doesn't fit in these open world games, but they think that every single one of them needs a main through thread. And I would argue that it doesn't. Because if the goal is exploration and experiencing this world, like any sort of knowledge that comes pre-installed into you or any directives that come pre-installed into you, they sort of taint the explorative nature of the game and like the idea of wandering around in this space.
I almost see it like placing the two items on a scale. Like on one side you have the concept of the main story, and on the other side you have, I guess, the filler content or side quests, and one of those has to be weighted heavier than the other. For like a game like the Far Cry series, there's stuff you can do because it's arguably an open world game, and there's stuff you can do in terms of like, I don't know, maybe setting up radio towers or overtaking bandit camps, but that's a back seat to the actual story that drives everything forward versus a game like, Fallout or Skyrim where there's hundreds and thousands of like little self-contained mini stories and mini quest chains, like the Thieves Guild, it's its own little story. The Dark Brotherhood, it's its own little story. And I think those are meaty enough that you could actually take out the main story completely and people would still find a really good sense of enjoyment out of it.
I wanna talk about The Witcher 3 for a second here, because even though that game has a main story that you follow because it progresses everything, pushes everything forward, it does lead you to places that you can then explore. Like the main story does not give you cause to run all over the place if you don't want to. Yet if you do, you find a lot of things worth exploring.
Do you think The Witcher could function without a story? If the story was literally just you're Geralt, you're a monster hunter, have at it?
I don't think so. I think your character is too predefined in that.
Yeah, but your character is someone who goes around killing monsters. You could make a game centered around that entirely, if you want, because Geralt has been doing that his entire life, basically, so he might as well do it now with you playing him. It doesn't really need the story, but...
What you have is a clear division there. Like, am I entering this world? Am I a blank slate? And I think of myself as being the one doing this thing? Or am I, like, inhabiting the role of this character?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Geralt, I think, is very specifically a character. And I think the problem is when they do this mishmash thing where they sort of try to put you into the world as a blank slate, but then have a main story that would stem from a character. Like in Fallout 4, that's not my kid. I don't, like...
Yeah, like you have no obligation as a player. Like you don't feel any connection to want to seek him out.
Right. So I'm exploring this world as a character when in perhaps it might be better to experience this world as a blank slate where I can fully sort of invest myself as thinking like I'm the person doing this stuff. And it's like those two concepts sort of bash against each other.
Yeah,
I feel
you can't really inhabit the character and inhabit the world. You can't inhabit the character as the, you being the character, and then you at the same time you can't inhabit the world as yourself. You kind of have to pick one.
Absolutely. And if I'm inhabiting a pre-established character with all these sort of ideas of what they are and who they are pre-installed, that game needs a main story.
Yeah, because you're going to feel a disconnect. If you do something that Geralt wouldn't normally do, it's going to be like it's kind of like a hiccup, I guess,
It's like, does it break your immersion?
Yeah, it's like a hiccup between Geralt and you when you do something as Geralt that Geralt wouldn't do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
But at the same token, though, I'm torn back and forth because on the one hand, like I agree that I don't think some games don't necessarily need a main story because there's enough content within like the mechanics and the world itself to kind of fill your time. But at the same time, and I guess a main story could also help drive through that content. I know the Monster Hunter series it was on PlayStation, on Vita, and then like on the DS. I love that series. It's one of my favorite ones, and I'm constantly talking about it because like it's a very simple concept. It's just you go out to the world and you hunt monsters, craft gear to hunt stronger monsters. It's basically like a perpetual raid boss. But one of the complaints the series has had is that there's really no story tying everything together. Like there's no reason why you're in this town hunting this particular beast. It's just, like players just have an autonomy. Like you go quest board, grab it, and you keep going. And then Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate came out, and then they actually added like a little bit of a narrative that kind of really tells the story of why you're here, why you're hunting this thing down, and where you're continuing. And it ties a lot of the game mechanics forward, and it got like universal praise for just including that small little story in there. So I think
that's why I think it's important.
Yeah, it can definitely serve a purpose in regards to like I guess tying together a lot of the mechanics in the game, but it's just funny how with certain games it almost feels like it's not necessary versus other games that it can really enhance the experience.
Yeah, but a little bit of linearity in a game that is usually about player choice is pretty good because most people need something to aim for. Like when you're not sure what you can do in a game, you can at least follow the story and see where that brings you.
That's true.
Ooh, that's actually a really good point though, and I think that kind of narrows down what the issue is with the story in open world games like Bethesda games, where I guess because there's not really an obligation to complete it because you have so many other options, it's really easy to ignore it. Versus games where I guess they're more linear in nature, it almost, not that it feels like an obligation, but it's easier for you to follow the story.
The story helps you understand why you're there in the first place. And whatever you do when you're there or once you're there is completely up to you. But at least gives you a reason to explore this world. I think Skyrim or Fallout or Mass Effect or The Witcher would feel a lot less meaningful if it didn't have that narrative to sort of push yourself forward, to something to work towards while you're doing other stuff.
It's possible that it's just that also maybe like the implementation of the examples that I know about that make it seem strange to me. Mm-hmm. Like, I guess you do need some sort of end goal, but that doesn't necessarily have to be like the last chapter of a story. And I just feel like in games, like Skyrim, it doesn't fit. I feel like in The Witcher, it absolutely does fit. And I'm not sure what the particular differences of those are, but it's probably something about like the overall interactivity of the world or maybe something like that. I don't know. With The Witcher, I feel like this world very much pre-exists. Like there is just all kinds of stuff behind the scenes that is already there.
Yeah, but it's not, the same can be said of the Elder Scrolls and of Fallout. There's an insane amount of lore for those games. Same can be said of any Warhammer or Warcraft game.
Yeah, you're totally correct. Okay, see, that's what I'm trying to sort of parse out in my own head, like why I feel that way about The Witcher, but not about like various Bethesda games.
Why are you playing the game in the first place? It's even if the game is very enjoyable to play, within the context of the game, are hardly ever playing the game for the game's sake, for that moment right now and then. You're always working towards something. Or it's that new item, or it's that new boss. Or in No Man's Sky, for instance, there's no story there. There's just one goal. Go to the center of the universe. Why? Fuck knows. Just do it.
Yeah.
And that is enough to give it a sense of purpose. And that's what I'm arguing for. Stories give you a sense of purpose.
Yeah, so they're like a tool that you use to like add direction to something.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And usually in big open world games, stories bring you to areas you want to go to because there's interesting stuff there for you to find. But you have no reason to go there prior to the story specifically telling you, like, dude, go there. Stuff happens.
Yeah, no, you're definitely in the right. You're definitely in the right realm. I just think that maybe like the idea of giving a player direction doesn't have to necessarily always be a story, and I think
I agree with you, Sam.
it would be like if they decided to put a story in No Man's Sky and like you hopped these 6 planets to learn the next chapters of the story. Like that would feel weird.
Would it? I mean, I haven't played it yet. There's no way of knowing if it would feel weird if they were to implement it.
Well, from what I read, they actually do have that, where there's not that there's like a story in the sense of like go from point A to point B, but there is a sense, there's like an overall narrative or a backstory in the game and lore that you actually discover by going to different planets and like I guess finding artifacts and kind of piecing together the lore yourself.
Yeah, it's the context. It gives context to everything that you're doing.
Yeah, I see that, but at the same time, I think of games that don't have a story that I love, like DayZ, and if they put I know I've seen people online ask for like lore or some kind of backstory or maybe a single player mode, and it's that for some reason it really turns me off because it's like I just want that world to be able to make my own thing without any narrative influencing it. Like I have my personal.
That's what it's doing
narrative.
anyway. That's what it's doing anyway, right? I mean, there is no story in DayZ because that game is specifically made for emergent gameplay. You get a goal, like call the story a goal. Call the last chapter of a story a goal that you can achieve while you're doing all the other things. And in DayZ, it just happens to be survive because zombies. In No Man's Sky, is get to the center of the universe. In The Witcher 3, it's save Ciri.
I guess in DayZ there is a bare bones narrative. It's like, hey, there's a zombie apocalypse. Don't die. That's a narrative. I mean, it's a very simple one,
right?
But it's still a narrative.
I know what it is. It's a pacing thing, and so I'm gonna try to break this out. Okay, it's a pacing discrepancy between the main story and the rest of the game. In The Witcher, it feels like that whole game is one long story. Like you could compress all the side activities and the main story together into one thing and print it in a book, and I would read it and it would be the story of Geralt in The Witcher 3.
Okay.
With the Bethesda games, the main story feels like it's separated away from the rest of everything else. And like it goes on hold while you go do all this other stuff. And those two elements never combine together to form one through thread for the entire game.
That's a really good point.
And that's ludonarrative dissonance. That's not the fault of the inclusion of the story. That's, like you said, it's the way it's implemented.
Right. It's not the fault of the inclusion. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a fault of implementation. And I think that by implementing it in somewhere, I don't know if that means that it doesn't fit there, or if I don't know if it means that it was implemented poorly. But the fact that it just seems like you hit pause on the main story and then all this other stuff happens and then you come back and then you hit play again. I think that is what leads me to believe, like, does this game even need a main story?
That's a really good point. And I think part of it is also done in the way that it's distributed, because in The Witcher 3, remember, I guess like the chapter you're on, the story also affects what area you have access to. So I think it's a lot easier to get that feeling that everything's interconnected when you get taken to a certain area with Geralt, like the White Orchid, and from there you can actually go and do all the side quests and stuff like that, because it's in that area that's related to the story. And then when you move on to the next area, you have a whole separate section available to you that connects to that. Whereas in Skyrim, like you said, I can, as soon as the game starts, I can run off and go join the College of Winterhold without ever killing a dragon. and that story will just wait there for you to you eventually have time to come back and go.
And that's where Bethesda always drops the ball, right? Like, what's the number one joke about Fallout 4? Like, somebody stole my kid and I'm just over here, like, collecting bottle caps.
Yeah.
You know, like, that is the main thing. Like, I think people feel that, and it's like, haha, that's a funny joke. But I think it creates, like, this ragged tear down the middle of that entire video game and makes me think you don't even need the main story. So that may or may not be true. It might just be an implementation thing. But, I mean, like, I look at it, and in my head, I'm like, just drop that thing. It's not necessary.
I think in Bethesda games, it's just usually the fault of Bethesda, like how they implement the story, because they never give you sufficient reason to care in the first place. A good example would be for Fallout 4. Like, you got to go save your animatronic doll that's supposed to be your son because you've seen him 5 minutes in the intro and now you miss him. But why? I've not been given sufficient reason to care about him. So why would I?
Well, I mean, theoretically, do they need to flesh that out? I mean, it's your kid. Like,
well, yeah. If they make this huge song and dance at the start in Sanctuary before the war to give you a sense of who you're supposed to be in the first place, but the way that it's done, the way that it's paced, it just makes it feel like either an afterthought or just something that shouldn't have been there in the first place. Because it doesn't seem to serve a purpose.
Even Fallout 3, I mean, I felt no connection to my father figure, even though you spend the first half of the, well, not first half, like the first intro of the game, like growing up and hanging out with your dad. And when he leaves and, your quest is to go out and search for him, I really didn't have any attachment to go find him.
Yeah, that's the problem I have with most Bethesda games. Their characters never really seem fleshed out, or the implementation of their characters never really seems built to actually make you care.
Yeah, but I mean, going back to Sam, though, because I think he had a really good point, and it ties back to the pacing of the stories told, I guess the main story in relation to the rest of the world. And when you have a world where you can actually access everything else and the story just kind of waits for you, it does give you that kind of disassociation where you feel like the story isn't even necessary here.
all right, that will bring us to the end of episode 32 of the Select Characters podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. As always, you can find us on any of the online repositories. You can find us at reddit.com/r/selectcharacters. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. selectcharacters@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook. Find us on Twitter. Find us on iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating because that really helps us out. I got them all. I did it.
And we have a break coming up.
Yes.
Yeah, we do. Next week, we're going to have a Game of the Year edition of the podcast, basically, where we're going to discuss what our favorite games of this year were. And after that, we are going to spend some time with friends and family, and we'll take a 2-week break, and we'll be back in January, like the first Wednesday of next year.
So we didn't disappear, and we will be back, and we'll be back in the new year with what we're trying to work on calling Select Characters 2.0.
Yes, it's going to be very exciting if everything goes the way that we plan it to go. So yeah.
So stay tuned. Check out the YouTube channel for the Elite Dangerous Game Club and subscribe, like, all that good stuff. And everybody have a wonderful week. And we will be back with Game of the Year stuff next week.
Okay, bye.
Yay, games.
Bye.